Now it's time for our featured guest. This week's featured guest is Karen Hugg, author of the book Leave Your Troubles Behind. Karen is a green wellness designer, author, and professional gardener with over 25 years of experience. Her latest book, Leave Your Troubles Behind: How to De-Stress and Grow Happiness Through Plants, helps people relieve their stress by engaging with the joys of nature. With an MA, MFA, and certification in horticulture, Karen has contributed to the Washington Post, Wired, Thrive Global, and other national media outlets. She's been featured on the TV show New Day Northwest and as an expert source for Mind, Body, Green, and other magazines. Her thoughts on plants and mental health can be heard on multiple podcasts, including Brain Matters and New Books Network, as well as the Let's Get Growing show. Now, let's welcome Karen Hugg to the program.
Hi,
Hi,
thank you.
hi, Karen. It's so great to have you. I've been
Thanks for
really enjoying your book, so I've been looking forward to having you here on the show. Thanks for joining with us.
Yeah, you bet. Looking forward to it. I love your set, by the way. You've got music and plants together. Those are a good combination right there.
That's right. That's right. I love all my plants, that's for sure. So let's dig right into it. You are the author of this book, Leave Your Troubles Behind, and
Yes,
it's all about de stressing and growing happiness through plants. It's
yes.
one of the things I say too a lot, and I talk about on my channel and here on the show as well too. Is that gardening has all of these great things that you can get from it. All the cool plants, all the food that you get, all those sort of rewards. But I think the biggest best reward is the kind of garden therapy that you get. You know, and there's a lot a lot going on in the world, and a lot of things, whether or not we're working full-time jobs, or we've got family issues, or just the whole you know world itself. Maybe a lot of us are watching the news and things are just troubling all the time. Getting out into your garden and growing plants and doing that sort of thing can really be something that really helps us in our overall health. And you really wrote a great book about all of that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you've got in your book.
Sure. Yeah, gardening is great therapy. And, what's amazing is that a lot of studies show that, you can de-stress by like taking a walk and things like that. But when you walk in nature, you de-stress in like half the time. Like it's an amazing result that you get. So if you want to de-stress quickly, get into nature. That's like the most basic
Yeah.
lesson that there is about that. Um, and just studies after study show that it's not only great for your mental health but your physical health too, like walking in a forest for an hour three
Yeah.
times a week has been shown to boost your cancer fighting cells. So
Yeah.
if you don't want cancer, take a walk in the woods on a regular basis. I mean, like it can be
Yep.
that simple.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that was one thing I was really enjoying about a lot of the content that's in this book, is that you really fill it with, not just, the things that are issues when it comes to life in general, but you really give solutions. You have a lot of different like activities. So like each one of your chapters kind of ends with different types of activities that you could do to kind of do that sort of thing. Talk about some of the different of your favorite activities that you suggest in the book.
Uh, well, one of my favorite activities, just because it's so much fun, because I like to hunt and go thrifting, hunting for old
Yeah.
stuff. I mean,
Right,
um,
right.
and I like to, I like to decorate with antiques and stuff like that. And so, one of my favorite activities is to make a kind of a nerdy retro frame, a family frame that you put pictures of plants in. You know those old frames where you had multiple little circles and ovals and squares for each one of your family members? You see them all
Yeah.
the time on people's walls. And now you can find them in thrift stores for like, $3 or something. And so I think it's really a fun activity that even to do with kids is to take pictures of plants and frame little pictures of plants and put them in the nerdy frame and then put that on your wall so you can kind of keep track of what you're growing, or you can keep track of what you want to grow, or you can keep track of what you're learning about and really into, almost like a vision
Yeah.
kind of a thing. So that's one activity that's kind of a home activity that families can do. There's a lot though. I mean, just one of the things I recommend in the book is like, just if you're in the office, go out to lunch and go sit in a public park and eat your lunch rather than sit at your desk and eat your lunch. Like just that
Yeah.
20 or 30 minutes in nature will go a long way in kind of restoring your attention, relaxing your heart rate, lowering your blood
Hmm.
pressure and kind of, lowering your stress overall. So, um but in terms, it's funny because I haven't thought about my activities in a little while, but the first one I have in the book is called a stress bramble, which I recommend for people who are really stressed out and feel like they're being pulled in all these different directions. And that's just basically a mind map of all your stress. And so
Okay.
it's kind of like you draw a leaf and you put the source of stress, like work, home, whatever, in that leaf, and then like vines you connect it to another leaf that you just brainstorm about what your stress is, so you can basically get all of your stress out on paper so you can assess it, look at it, and then find ways to neutralize it. So that's just like one. There's some journaling exercises in there. There's some family activities. What else is there? There's like there's how to throw a plant swap party. We
Yeah.
gardeners have so many leftover pots and cuttings and
Hmm.
starts and whatever sprouted beans that we're not going to grow. Why not, like, if you live in an apartment building, you can go in the lobby and just have a plant swap party where you put out your pots and your old trowels and your plants and whatever house plants you're
Yeah.
looking to exchange, and then meet your neighbors. And then you get that social energy while you're talking plants and while you're, learning about plants and having fun with it.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually one of the ones I bookmarked in here too. It's like one
Oh,
of my
really?
favorites. I was like, yeah, I really like that idea, being able to, also, find some of those people in your local area too, who are just as plant nerdy as you are, it's really good to get together with people who have those similar interests and everything, and to be able to do something like that as a plant swap party, I thought was a really great one too. And one of the other ones I really like too that I actually implemented myself was, kind of like the first thing you do in the day, you're waking up. So one
Oh,
of the things you should do is put a plant right there. So the first thing you're waking up to is a plant right off the bat too. And I really like that. So I got one set up right in my bedroom, right there on the nightstand, ready to go. So when I wake up, I turn over and look, and there's a plant just to get my day started.
exactly. Yeah, I that's funny you mentioned that one. That one slipped my mind, but I get a lot of comments about that activity. And that is part of
Yeah.
the gratitude. I think I call it like a gratitude plant or something, where
Right.
so before you go to bed at night, you just keep a little post-it pad by your bed and a pen, and you write down on each, maybe you could do one or you could do multiple, whatever you want, but write down a little phrase or sentence about what you're grateful for that day, and then
Yeah.
put it on the pot, on your plant by your bedside. So when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you see is what you're grateful for,
Yes.
from the previous day. And so it will kind of feed your mind in a way that looking at your phone just can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
yeah, so that I think it's a really healthy thing. I keep one by my bed, and if you don't have a window by your bed, you can always put a little grow bulb in like one of
Mhm.
those little, arm,
Yeah.
lamps, and put
I
it over
actually have
your.
one that hangs on kind of a chain. So I have one that goes right on top, goes right up above it.
Yeah.
And yep. And also it makes for a good alarm clock too. when that light, I have it on a timer, so when that light pops on, it's time to get up.
Oh, nice one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I got the noise of an alarm clock, beeping at me. I just got a light saying, "Hey, it's time to get up."
yeah, it's simulating the sun, you know?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, one of the things that your book talks about throughout the book too are what you have is the 7 strategies of green leisure. You want to talk about some of those 7 strategies?
Yeah. So when I was researching the book, I found over and over again that happiness researchers have found that there are about 7 things that make us happy, 7 activities, I should say. And they are learning, experiencing, like through the senses, idly playing, supporting another life, uniting with others, like uniting with like minded people, recognizing what you have, and then exercise. So when you can do one or more of those activities, per week, let's say, you will be happier. If you can do those activities as they relate to nature, your happiness will skyrocket. So basically, I use those words because those words I found spelled leisure. They didn't
Yeah,
spell work, they didn't spell labor, they spelled leisure. And
yeah,
so, one thing I really believe strongly in is people working less and relaxing more because
yeah,
Americans are such hardworking people. And that's wonderful. But we don't take our vacation time like we should, and we don't unplug like we should. We're very
yeah,
plugged into screens, we're very indoor people, which has its purpose, certainly. But um, if we can apply the principles of happiness to plants, studies show that we will maintain our mental health much better. So,
yeah,
there's so much talk about social media and how social media is changing and stuff. But to be honest, I can't help but think that the next big thing is nature and the
yeah,
outdoors, you
yeah.
know?
I
Because
really
it was our
agree.
first home, and that's what we crave
Hmm.
in a way, you know what I mean? Like, we get
Yep.
depressed because we're disconnected from it a lot of the time.
Yes, that's true. So true. And also for you too, you were one of those people who was working all the time. You used to work in the tech industry, right?
Yes, I did.
So,
Let's just say I worked for the biggest online retailer that you might know
okay.
of.
Okay.
And, I was
Nice.
so filled with, you know, I get hundreds of emails every day. I had hundreds of tasks, all these different people to talk to. My mind was just jammed with stuff. And I
Hmm.
was sitting all the time. I was staring at a screen all the time. I like lived in this little white screen, you know?
Yeah,
And
right.
um, but kind of instinctually, I always used to go home and I used to kind of garden at home and read about plants and read about gardening, and I realized it was much later, many years later, that I realized, oh, I'm trying to soothe myself. I'm trying to self-medicate
Yeah.
with plants. I'm
Hmm.
trying to recover here from this.
Yeah.
And it worked basically.
Yeah.
And it worked so much that I ended up going to horticulture school and, becoming a professional gardener. And I never looked back.
Yeah. What a great change too, and like you said, and I worked in a industry that was really stressful for a long time too, and found that same sort of situation as I picked up kind of at the beginning a hobby of gardening. That's how it kind of started out. I started with a few different things and was growing, and it was the more I saw that same sort of thing you're talking about, I was just kind of learning on my own about de-stressing in my garden and what I was doing. And you just get to notice some of those changes in yourself, some of those changes that are happening while you're out in the garden, while you're working with these plants and all of that. It's easy to kind of understand kind of that point you were just making about kind of that's kind of one of the next things we're heading to as more and more people are able through even social media, as it kind of works in a sense for people to recognize or hear more about people like yourself and books that you're writing, to, get out into the garden and to discover this for yourself, and those remedies that you get by being outside, by digging in the soil and all that sort of stuff, just really, and what it does for us when it relieves us from our jobs and our stress and our, even if you're not working those big full-time jobs, or working for some of these stressful situations, we might have family issues, or again, as we mentioned earlier too, we might be plugged into the news a little too much and hearing about what's going on in the world and all of that. And those things can be really stressful when it comes down to it. And to be able to, recognize what being outdoors and being around plants can do for us is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke that I fell in love with gardening because plants don't talk back.
Yeah.
There's no there's no meetings with plants, you know?
Yeah.
Plants aren't going to betray you. Plants aren't going to gossip about you. Plants aren't going to, you know what I mean? They're just so
Yep.
honest, and they just do what they need to do in a very authentic way. And I love that about them. And
Yeah.
yeah, like when you're out in the garden, there's so many things that gardening combines. It combines creativity, exercise, just creating something that wasn't there previously. You can literally
Yeah.
build something when you're gardening. There's so much to learn about gardening. There's so many plants to learn about and so many ins and outs of it to explore.
Y- Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let me see here. One of my favorite paragraphs that I got here, I'm just going to read from your book. What I
Sure.
love, what I love about the natural world is that there's so much to learn and so much to imagine. It's endless. For instance, I've been involved with gardening for almost 25 years now, but there's lots I don't know. I discover new stuff every day, new plant cultivars, new design approaches, new products, even existing plants I wasn't familiar with. There's a ton of fascinating information and images out there, and most of it isn't political or complex or underhanded or intense. It's just the natural world waiting to be discovered.
Mm,
I
yeah.
loved that one. When I read that, I was like, that's it, when it comes down to it, learning, there's so much to learn in the garden, you get some of those first experiences, but then you just discover new things. Again, like I say, new plants, new ways of growing those plants, and all that sort of stuff. And then, we can really build kind of, I mean, in my case, a real obsession for gardening and growing, but,
Yeah.
there's so much to be discovered in the growing world.
Definitely, it's endless. Like I said, I mean, it's true. I've been doing this since, like the late 90s, and I still don't know everything. I mean,
Yep.
like I'll go to Hawaii and I'll just be like, "Oh my God, what is that?" What is that plant? It's so cool. I mean, I still get a buzz. I still get a charge from exploring gardening and plants.
Oh
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, especially well, I mean, you talk about Hawaii. You get into some of those other like tropical zones and all those just beautiful, awesome plants they can grow. Gosh, I wish I could do that myself. But it's great to be able to discover those sort of things. And again, just having that constant learning. Again, like you said, gardeners who I've talked to who've been gardening, they're for many years, yourself 25 years. We talked with Gardner Scott, a few weeks back ago, and he's got, a good 40 years of it, and we talked about the same sort of thing that, that you're constantly learning. I don't think you can ever learn everything when
Yeah.
it comes down to it. There's no
Right.
real, final graduation in the sense of growing and that sort of stuff. And I kind of always say that, if you're not learning, you're not really gardening.
Oh, that's
You're always, you're always, there's always something more to get. And I think that's one of the things that's really great about it is it offers so much. It's endless when it comes down to it. So you get
yeah.
endless therapy, you get endless de-stressing, you get endless all of that by just getting out there and learning about growing plants, and you get so many rewards. And then again, too, as I say, too, you grow all these things and then you get tomatoes. So how about how
Right.
good can that be,
I know, you
right?
get food. Yeah,
You get the food, you get
yeah,
the, you know,
and I mean
the fruits of your labor.
yeah, and you get exercise, I have a piece in the book about how after I had that tech job and I was pretty soft, let's just say, and I started
Right.
gardening, and just by crisscrossing my yard and just
Yeah.
taking thousands of steps and carrying stuff and squatting and doing all this stuff, I ended up losing weight and getting stronger. Like,
Yeah.
there's just really no downside to it. You know what I mean? I mean, you have to be
Right.
careful that you don't overdo it. But
Yeah.
I mean, overall, it's an amazing thing. I mean, I just finished an article that's going to come out in the on a website called Shondaland about how gardening is like the ultimate exercise. It
Oh, yeah.
combines all these different movements that fitness people recommend. So
Yeah.
squatting, digging, stretching, all of these movements that fitness experts have you do at the gym. Well, you do
Yeah.
them naturally in a garden.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how cool is that? Plus you get the
Yeah.
sensory experience of like smelling, a rose or whatever, smelling beautiful plants and seeing beautiful plants and
Yeah.
all that stuff, hearing the birds and things like that. So,
Exactly, exactly. I saw a post online once where it said, my exercise equipment, and it was basically a bunch of gardening equipment like hose and shovels and these sort of things, you know.
uh-huh. Yeah,
You don't need the big treadmills and you know the weight bench and all of that.
right.
You can get all of that through gardening and growing things too. That's really awesome.
Yeah, you just need a heavy bag of compost.
Yep, yep. Lifting those bags of compost, all that sort of stuff.
Right,
Digging and shoveling, you know,
right.
you got, again, you're getting all those movements in,
Yep.
getting all that exercise. Yeah, again, so much that gardening and growing really offers for you out there, you know, whether it's again exercise, you know, de-stressing, growing, you know, food and all that sort of stuff is really awesome. So let's do one of the things I love to do here on the show is talk a little bit about people's gardening stories. So let's kind of take a step back a little bit and let's talk a bit about what and how you got started in gardening. What were some of those first gardening experiences for you?
Well, and I talk about this in the book. My biggest gardening experience was um, just discovering a butterfly bush, which is a very simple shrub. In fact, and I know that it's considered the straight species is considered a weed in some parts of the country. So I understand that, but I kind of fell in love with this. Like I said, when I was working, and when I was overworked in tech, and I would come home at night and I would look at these. We had just bought a little house with this very pathetic backyard, and I would look in the catalogs like Burpee or White Flower Farm. The catalogs you kind of get once you own a house, and I would page through them, and I saw this picture that said, the little ad said, draw butterflies to attract butterflies to your garden. And I thought, what? Like, no way. This is like you're saying I can actually like manipulate nature with a plant? Like, no way. Like I grew up in Chicago. Okay. So I
Yeah.
mean my mom grew a little bit of tomatoes, but that was it. We had a short growing season and it just wasn't part of my life. And I just couldn't believe it, and I just thought, "Okay, all right, well, we'll see, but I wanna do that. Yeah, I want butterflies in a garden. I definitely want to." So, I ended up buying one. It was Black Knight, which is, that really dark, dark purple, species,
Yeah.
yeah, species or cultivar, I guess I should say. And, I planted it and, yeah, butterflies came. And I couldn't believe it. I was just like, "What? This works? Are you kidding me? This is the coolest thing ever?" So,
Yeah.
and then, like we talked about earlier, when I realized that as I started caring for that plant, everything dropped, all the stress from the day dropped away. It was just
Yeah.
me and that plant, and I would see it from my kitchen window, which kind of made me happy. And then, like after work, I would go out and water it and check on it and, cut off the dead blossoms and that type of thing. And that feeling of sort of like peace and
Mhm.
just sort of like no, like I didn't have angst, I
Yeah.
had like a zen feeling of relaxation when I was with it. Um,
Mhm.
that I got addicted to that feeling. And so
Yeah.
then I just started basically ordering more plants and experimenting, like Katie was talking about earlier, just kind of failing forward and trying
Yeah.
this, trying that plant, seeing what survived, reading up more about my zone, which is in zone 8 in Seattle, and learning all I could. And I realized too that learning about them, like just reading gardening magazines in bed at night, made me sleepy because they relaxed me.
Right.
So, I ended up leaving, the tech job and, going to horticulture school. And once I learned about plants, the more I learned about plants, the more I respected plants, the more I fell in
Yeah.
love with them, and the more I realized that they are incredibly delicate and incredibly resilient. Like,
Yes.
it's amazing. It's amazing. And also now, just how they do what they need to do, whether you're there or not. Like, if the apocalypse came and we were all wiped out, plants would be
Yeah.
just fine. They would be
Yeah.
just fine, you know? They just do what they need to do. And so, I just kind of, like, my passion only grew deeper, and then I ended up going, um, off and starting my own little gardening business. And once I did that, I was just busy as all get out. It just took off from
Yeah.
there and I never looked back. So,
Yeah, it's kinda, for some of us, it's kind of amazing where, that kind of, initial passion for gardening takes us down the road, you know? I would never have thought that, when I first started growing my first gardens, that someday I'd be hosting my own gardening show here on YouTube and all of that, and all the things that have come in between and everything too. So, gardening can give you lots of different gifts, and again, too, is, kind of can't express it enough is that overall feeling you get from growing and gardening, and that's one of the real reasons why I was looking forward to having you on the show, is to kind of talk about some of this stuff, because it was really one of those things when I first started growing my garden. I was dealing with not just work stress, but a lot of family stress, a lot of world stress, a lot of these stressors, and I didn't get into gardening thinking that any of that stuff was going to, that gardening was going to be helpful for those sort of things. It was something that I just found that was like, when I was out in the garden growing stuff, just as you were talking about, I just started noticing that, that all these stresses were kind of lifting away. I'm digging in the soil, I'm planting out some plants, or I'm pruning something, weeding, doing these sort of things. And I kind of get lost in that world, and it becomes, again, sort of like you're saying too, a serenity space, a
mhm.
place where we can just really kind of relax our mind from all of these things that are going on. And that's, I think, what really pushed my passion for gardening. I was enjoying a lot of the aspects of it, learning and all these sort of things. But when you found that it was doing that for me, I was like, you know what? I need more of that.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and it still continues for me to be that refuge, you know?
Hmm.
I mean, I have 3 kids, and thankfully, they're all now a little older,
Right.
but when they were young, my life was crazy, and one of them is a special needs, child, and, that can be very challenging, and I love her to death,
Yeah.
and she's great, but, you know, I mean,
Right.
our life was chaos. We had
Right.
3 kids and 2 dogs and 2 cats, and, I mean, we used to say, my husband and I used to say, we have 9 souls that we have to keep alive in this house.
Right.
And, with school and work and lessons and, activities and all that stuff, and the cat getting ill and throwing up, and, I mean, like, there's so many things that, are
Hmm.
stressful in life, and the political climate was not not
Yeah.
lined up with my politics at the time, and I felt very, you know, I don't know, just I took a lot of that on too.
Yeah. It's
But
kind of
when I
amazing how we take those sort of things on as well as our own personal life. We take
Yeah,
the rest of the world on as well too, which is
yeah,
good, and it's good in some ways to be active in a little bit, but again, it could be such a heavy stressor.
exactly. Yeah, and that's during that time, my husband used to take the kids every Saturday morning to the playground so I could work in the garden. And that
Yeah.
was like it was like going to church. Like that was the feeling that I got from it. 3 hours of just, like you said, just tidying up, doing whatever. The
Hmm.
the great thing is that you can actually see the results too. It's not an
Yeah.
ethereal thing like something online which goes away. You see it every day. If you plant a Daphne, you're gonna smell and see that Daphne every day, by
Yeah.
your front door or whatever, And when the kids came home, I felt ready to take things on again. I
Yeah.
felt okay, I can deal with this again now, It was
Yeah.
almost like this medicine that I needed, on a regular
Yeah.
basis.
Exactly. And I think again too, going back to the book too, I think there was one part where you talked about, having that kind of space just to kind of relax in, you know. So, like you were talking about there, you do the things during the day, kids come home, things start kicking back in or whatever. But then, when they get to bed or whatever, then you can kind of just go out and relax in this space and just kind of relieve yourself from your day and all of that too. Again, as I guess I said too, kind of a serenity space,
Exactly.
when you have a nice garden, and then setting those things up purposefully though too is another big thing just for that.
Yeah, and that's one thing I want to say is, a lot of people live in apartments and they don't have an outdoor space. And one of the things I wanted to do with Leave Your Troubles was to address that. And
Yeah,
that's why I have a section towards the end of the book about creating a green leisure lounge.
yeah, that's what it
Creating
is. Yeah,
and that's what I'm doing more and more with other people is I'm doing interior green sanctuary design with houseplants and
yeah,
to have a sacred space where you can go and just you know get lower the stress or get rid of the stress from the day is really important, and plants are a big part of that, even if it's inside. And it doesn't have to be a lot of plants. You don't have to go crazy like you or I would. You
right, right, yeah,
3 plants. It doesn't even, you don't. And also another thing I wanted to mention, and I talk about this in the book, is that if you are physically challenged, or you don't have enough time, you can use fake plants to give you the same mental health benefits as live
right,
plants. And
yeah,
um, you don't get the full benefits.
right,
You don't get the smell of a jasmine or a gardenia or something, but you can use just seeing plants in your sight line. Even in our peripheral vision, studies show that it lowers stress and helps us recover faster from stress. So
yeah.
even using fake plants inside your house is beneficial. So
Yeah, yeah, I could see that too. Just the idea of seeing green things just kind of puts in your mind that it's, even if it's not living, I don't know, I think there might be something psychologically that just kind of, you know, connects the idea of living things and that sort of thing too. So kind of boosts those sort of mental energies.
yes, exactly. I mean, nature was our first home, so we are instinctually wired to be in nature. So when we see nature, it relaxes us. It makes us happy. It doesn't make us agitated, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So you've been gardening and growing things for we mentioned too about 25 years and all of that. So you've got a lot of growing and gardening experience. So what are some of those favorite plants that you like to grow in your garden?
Whew. Well, God, there's so many, right? Like, how do you answer that? You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like,
right.
it's just so many plants are so cool. But I guess I was trying to think about plants that are a lot of people can grow across the US because in Seattle we're actually blessed, or the Northwest. You're in the Northwest too, right? So
Southern Oregon. So yeah,
yeah, oh, and see,
just
it's even
just
better.
right in the edge of it.
Yeah, it's even better for me. We're right there on like kind of the cusp of California weather
Yep.
and Northwest weather. But
Yeah.
so I guess well, one of my, I mean, one plant that almost anyone in the United States can grow is Spirea magic carpet. Um,
Yeah.
I tend towards ornamental plants just because that's what I studied and I loved, and I'm a designer, so I'm kind of,
Yeah.
partial to creating art kind of through plants, so to speak, um,
Yeah.
in a design. But I love magic carpet because that's, I think, hardy to zone 3,
Okay.
and it it leaves out in these orangey yellow leaves, and it's mounded, so it grows in a very nice kind of tufted, behaved way. It
Yeah.
doesn't need very much pruning. It blooms in pretty, kind of dark pink flowers that
Hmm.
contrast with the foliage beautifully, and butterflies like it.
Yeah.
And it never it won't get, if you plant it in, full sun to part sun, it will never get any disease, and you never have to prune it. I mean, outside if
Oh,
you want to
nice.
deadhead it or shape it kind of,
Right.
but it's just sort of like one of those plants you can, just plant and not worry that much about. It's also can be very drought tolerant. Um, and it will get sometimes it will get like pretty fall color. So
Okay.
I love that as an all around shrub, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm partial to fragrant plants. I love, things like Daphne odora, Oreo marginata, which is a variegated Daphne that has
Yeah.
really strong smelling sweet flowers.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
I love those, and I'm a big advocate as a designer of planting plants that you can smell by your front door or wherever you enter your house. So that
Yeah.
every day when you go from your car to your house, you have a little mini experience of having that sweet smell hit you when you're not planning on
Yeah.
it, right? The surprise,
Yep.
of a scented plant can be so much fun. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, but honestly, I could go on forever, but, I mean, like, those are 2 of my favorites. A beauty berry, a Calicarpa bodinieri, which has those iridescent purple berries in late
Okay.
when nothing else is blooming and everything's kind of brown and just twigs, you see
Yeah.
purple berries, and they're so beautiful, and they just brighten your day,
Oh,
Um,
yes. Those are some awesome plants. Just a little side while you're talking about fragrant plants. I have a corn plant. It's an indoor plant, but it's a
uh-huh.
corn plant. And I don't know if you've ever gotten to experience a corn plant flower.
No.
I've been lucky enough to get 2 flowers this
Really?
year and then about 2 years ago, come on, and it's just actually just right here.
So when you say
And
corn plant, you're talking Dracaena, right?
yeah,
Like the
Dracaena
tall
fragrans is what
stalks.
it's called. Yeah, and there's a reason why it's called Dracaena fragrans too, is because
Uh,
it's these flowers are some of the most amazing smell and fragrance you'll ever experience in any of your indoor plants.
oh my
And
god.
it's such a heavy fragrance too.
Yeah,
Like I mean, if you leave your doors open,
yeah.
your neighbors will be smelling this as it wafts itself through your neighborhood. You
Ooh,
walk in the door, and the only real problem is that it's kind of rare for them to actual flower.
yeah.
I mean, it doesn't happen very often with your plants, and it really only lasts about a week or so. But it's one of the most amazing fragrances you'll ever have.
Oh my god. So what's your secret? How did you get it to bloom?
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I think it's like most plants are flowering because of stress.
Yeah,
Because they want to produce a seed.
yeah.
They want to kind of do that. And I think that I just let this plant probably dry out a bit much. That might have been the case. It's the only thing I can really think of that might have been the situation between this year and the last time it happened before, is that it kind of got dried out a little bit. So maybe it was just kind of stressing from not having that. So it's trying to pump up the
Reproduce.
flower. Yeah, yeah. So I mean that's the only thing I can really think of. But but yeah, it's amazing. If you ever have ever get to see one or experience one, you'll definitely never forget it. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. Speaking of that, my I have a rattlesnake plant, which is one of those plants that has kind of like maroon or purple undersides, and then it's got
Oh
like
yeah,
green and light green variegation up the leaves.
yeah.
And I've had that thing for years, and all of a sudden, just a few days ago, I saw a little white flower pop up at the bottom,
Oh
and it
nice.
it grows apparently like it's a basil flower. Like it grows from the base of the plant up,
Yeah.
just boop, popped up, little white flower, actually big white flower. And I was like, where did you come from?
Right? Yeah. I love
That's
those.
another joy of gardening, right? Is when they bloom and you don't expect them to, and you're like, oh, hello, friend.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I have a transcendendia too that actually has been producing flowers off of it that I've been surprised about as well too. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, and they
Those
got
little
these
ones.
neat little tiny little
Yep.
flowers that come up off of them. Pretty
Yeah.
neat. I love it. But yeah,
Oh,
again, that's
cool.
just one of those great little surprises that you get in your plants and all of that.
Yeah.
So so we've talked about favorite plants. I'm sure that you've got some least favorite plants. I mean, things that either you just don't really care for growing or just present too much of a problem or difficult growing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, well, I'll say this in the Northwest. I don't know how it is in Southern Oregon, but in the Northwest, a lot of people use laurels, English laurels, as hedge plants.
Yeah.
And this drives me crazy because an English laurel is a tree. It is a tree. It's a
Yeah.
broadleaf tree. It's a broadleaf evergreen tree, which is very pretty. If
Yeah.
you ever see one as a tree, it's
Mhm.
beautiful. But nobody grows it as a broadleaf evergreen tree. They grow it as a hedge, and there's
Right.
hedges all over that you constantly have to trim. It wants to be big. People want to make it
Yeah.
small. It wants to be big. People want to make it small. you know. And so people spend their whole lives hedging and doing all this stuff with ladders and all this stuff. And the
Yeah.
thing just gets fatter and bigger and bigger, wider and wider.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like, if I was queen, and I could like wave a wand or something and
Yeah.
outlaw laurels as hedges, that's what I would do.
Right.
Because I just they're voracious too. They grow everywhere and they're very hard to get rid of once you have them.
Yeah.
um, they do produce berries, and they do kind of have a musky scent, which is interesting. So, I mean, I guess they have redeeming qualities, and they are very pretty. Um, but like I said, I see them all the time as hedges, and that's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
It's not actually the plant, but I guess how the plant is used.
Right.
Similarly, bamboo is just such a messy plant that doesn't have very many redeeming qualities. I mean, nothing against bamboo people, okay? I mean, like that's
Yeah.
cool if you like it, but it runs like crazy.
Oh my
It has
gosh.
to
Yeah.
have a barrier.
Yeah.
Rats love it because it's a lot of cover. And mostly people, it's very interesting because people will plant it as a privacy screen, but then
Yeah.
after a few years, it'll grow up and most of the foliage is at the top and it's just a
Yeah.
bunch of sticks. So it's not really privacy anymore.
Yeah. And then you got to worry about your neighbors too, because now your neighbors are growing them. Because like you said, they'll run and they'll just go all, I mean, they'll just keep going out and out and out and out. And they don't really get themselves contained unless of course you're growing them in the more southern climates and where it's a bit warmer, you can kind of keep them contained a little bit better. But in the Pacific Northwest, I have several friends up in that Seattle area who had bamboo, and it just gets really crazy. And it's
Yeah.
so hard. It's so hard to like walk around when you got these little bamboo shoots trying to pop up everywhere. And you're either tripping over them or, you know,
Yeah. I mean, I've had situations where they grow through a neighbor's driveway, the cracks in the driveway, you know.
right.
I mean,
They'll find their way.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's
I mean, I
crazy.
would love to experience, like in Asia, some of these big, huge
Yeah.
bamboo forests. I would
Yes.
love to go and check that sort of stuff out. I think
Yeah.
in that sort of sense, it would be great. But
Yes.
as like you were saying, if you're just trying to grow it as like a privacy edge, or you just wanting to put it in a little spot in your garden, then it's, again, they just run too much. And again, not really any redeeming qualities, as you said. So I could definitely
Right.
agree about bamboo for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, we could go on all day about about pest plants like buttercups or
Yeah,
that like weedy plants.
right.
But I mean, in terms of plants that I won't grow, I mean, I kind of find a lot of redeeming qualities in most things. I mean,
Yeah,
even like a blue star juniper, which is, that really icy blue juniper, which is very
yeah,
common or can be common. I think that's a
yeah,
great plant, especially to design, other foliage colored things off of.
right.
So I don't have too many, I'm not that picky. I guess I don't grow red flowering plants or yellow flowering plants. Those are two things that aren't really in the palette in my backyard.
Right.
They're too bold for my personality, I guess. I tend to
Yes.
purple, orange, magenta, blue, that type of thing.
All
So,
right. Okay, so let's actually real quick. I wanted to ask you again too. What kind of inspires you? I mean, I'm sure you started gardening and you were learning things, and through going to school for horticulture and all of that. But what inspires you now to become an author and start writing books on all these plants and
yeah.
different experiences that you had in the garden?
Well, being a gardener, when I was working, I would have time off in winter. And so I
Yeah,
started, when I was in tech, I was working as an editor, a content manager type of person. And so I've always been, that's what I went to school for in college. And so I've always been a writer, and then I became a gardener. And so in winter, when I had time off, I started contributing little gardening articles to little sort of local publications and gardening websites and that type of thing. And then, it just kind of grew from there. But, I mean, the things that, the thing that inspired me to talk about gardening, I mean, I guess it was really just, what is it? I mean, it's just there's so much joy that I got from gardening that, I wanted to share that, you know? It's
yeah,
really fun, and in addition to being relaxing and creative and having good exercise and stuff and being rich for the human senses, it's just plain fun. Like, I
yeah,
just I just think it's a great way to, play. One thing I talk about in the book is, the importance of play. That's one of the leisure, the 7 strategies
yeah.
that happiness researchers say you need to do. You need to play. And really, when you think about gardening is the ultimate playtime, right? Because you're
Hmm.
experimenting, it's not high stakes, nobody's gonna get fired or lose their house because, you
Yeah,
planted, something, in the wrong place or something. So I guess I just love that gardening it's just such a great thing to play and experiment with. And I started writing. I kind of transitioned from writing nonfiction art, like how-to stuff, into coming up with stories about plants that hadn't existed before. So I really started writing fiction, and I first wrote a book called The Forgetting Flower, which was about, where I kind of realized, was asking myself the question, what would happen? Like, all these plants smell great, right? And like jasmine or gardenias and so on. What would happen
hmm.
if there was a plant that had a scent that could be harmful or dangerous?
Oh,
How would that
yeah,
work? And who would use it, and what would that scenario be? And so I created a story about a plant, where if you inhaled the scent, you would forget the last thing you thought of or the last memory you had,
oh
and
wow.
built a story, a thriller, basically, a literary thriller about that, about a woman who inherits this plant from her sister and has to take care of it. But every time she has to take care of it, she has to put on a gas mask. she, she has to keep it in a little, sorry, Edwardian case, you know,
Yeah,
because if it blooms, it's going to emit a gas that will make her pass out.
yeah,
So she has to go through all this stuff. She has to hide. She hides it in the back of her store. She only, like, checks on it, like I said, with this gas mask, and keeps it very contained. But then a friend of hers who knows about the plant ends up dying, and
Yeah.
she isn't sure whether she caused that or the plant did or what's going on. And she ends up getting involved with mobsters and people who want these flowers to sell on the black market. So anyway, that was the first story I had come up with, and I ended up traditionally publishing that book. I published a follow up about a speculative apple that
Right.
was a medicinal apple, and then I ended up doing another story in Provence. And then I wrote Leaf Your Troubles because it was the pandemic, and
Yeah.
I was sitting around, and my friend who is a book editor said, "Hey, you want to write that book about plants and mental health you've always thought about?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"I guess so. I'm not doing anything else."
Right.
We ended up kind of working on Leaf Your Troubles, and then I published that. So that's kind of been my journey with writing, and kind of that's my mission, is to kind of talk about the wonders of plants through my writing. So
Yeah. Really awesome too. Really, I love the book, and I can't remember exactly how it came up or this and that, but too, I give a little bit of a plug to one of my favorite podcasts from the Pacific Northwest called TBTL.
yes,
Yes, and I can't remember how it was mentioned on their show, but I remember them talking about, yeah, mentioning your name and this book, and I knew that, well, that just fits me perfectly. I've got to go check that out. So, so I want to give a little plug out to them. In fact, I got a little, or this way right here, a little thing that says 10. So I'm a TBTL
nice.
10,
Yeah,
and have been since for many many years. But every now and then there comes a little piece of gold that comes out of there that really pertains to me. And when I heard about this book, it was one I knew that I had to get out and read for sure, because that it's one, as I mentioned, it's one of those things that from the very beginning of my gardening experience was the wonder of that discovery of how growing a garden can be can be a de-stressor, can help relieve some of those things that are going on in our lives and all of that too. So I love to talk about that whenever I can. So it's been really awesome to have you on our show to be able to talk about all of these sort of things. And again too, I really recommend everybody to go out and get this book, read this book. There's so much cool stuff in here. And again, like I said, I think one of the really cool things is not only do you talk about all of these sort of aspects of the stress and all that stuff, but you give people solutions, and you
yeah,
give people activities and things that you can just get out and do, simple things, more complex things, just all sorts of things that we can do to de-stress our lives through gardening and growing plants.
yeah. I really tried to make it so that even people who don't garden could go out and find, immerse themselves in nature somehow, either through public gardens, public parks, hiking, anything like that. You don't have to even garden to get the benefits of this. You just have to make it a practice to make sure
Yeah.
you get your green leisure in every week, you know?
Yeah. Yes, it's great. It's a really important thing for, all of us out there, no matter where we are, no matter what our lives are like, as we mentioned, whether it's a stressful job, stressful family, or just the world stressing you out, get out into a garden, find the relief from all of that. Find your serenity space, or your green leisure lounge, as you talk about in the book, and get the benefits from growing plants and all of that. Now, is there any advice or any sort of things that you'd like to give gardeners or anything like that that we could leave gardeners with here?
Um, Well, I thought Katie was really great when she said that, just try and not be afraid to fail. I think that's
Yeah.
a great thing. But what I guess I want people to think about in terms of, like, just sort of see kind of how they view plants, like their mindset.
Yeah.
So kind of I want people to um, kind of see plants as your friend and see
Yeah.
like that plants can help you. Plants are your were your first home. So they're waiting for you. They're waiting to help heal you in whatever way
Yeah.
is right for you. And that can be, like I said, gardening or not. So just to remember that plants can heal you and to spend time in plants a little bit every week, every day, even better. Um,
Yeah.
as a way to help you relax and not work so hard. So,
Yeah. Exactly. Awesome. Awesome. So you have a website?
yes, it's Karen Hugg, Hugg at just.com.
Awesome, awesome. So you can go check that out. We'll have a link down below in the description so you can go check out her website. Go find her book, Leave Your Troubles Behind. I tell you what, you're going to enjoy this book. It's really worth purchasing. And again, Karen, thank you so much for taking your time out of your Saturday and joining with us here on our Let's Get Growing show.
You bet. Thank you so much, Enoch. Thanks to a 10 helping a fellow 10.
That's right. Awesome. I love it.